talking about exchanges. So why are exchanges important? Let's start up at that level, and then we'll drill down.
Yeah. So hi, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for having us. Excited to speak about Neufund and the landscape for international exchanges, as well as our partnership with MSX. I think exchanges are important because everybody's been sort of alluding to this term this morning and last night on the boat is this idea of liquidity. And there are a lot of sort of issuance platforms that have come about in both the U.S. and globally, and I think that's great. There's clearly a demand for regulated token offerings, for legally binding token offerings. But in order for this ecosystem to really flourish, we need these exchanges in order to enable liquidity and in order to enable people to be able to transact in the securities that they're purchasing. And so today, we don't have really exchanges that are equipped to, or I should say, until sort of this evolution has come about, we didn't have exchanges that were equipped to handle security tokens. And as this demand has popped up, I think the need for exchanges to come online to be able to handle these tokens has grown even stronger. So
what is necessary for an exchange to be able to be equipped to handle security tokens? What didn't they have? What do they have now?
Yeah. So I mean, would love for you to join in with respect to our partnership specifically. I think in the U.S. There's this idea of the alternative trading system, and that needed to be both revamped from a technological standpoint, like SharesPost as an example, had to revamp or is revamping their ATS in order to be able to integrate security tokens. But there's also the regulatory approvals that need to take place in the U.S. and they're different in Europe and in Asia, and I think that's an important thing to remember here as well. And from a regulatory standpoint, you need to ensure that KYC and AML are embedded into the tokens that you're trading, because that's a very, very, very important aspect of having regulated token offerings.
Right.
Well, picking on what you just said, Alex, my name is Cliff. Thank you, everybody, for having me here. I come from the Malta Stock Exchange. Anybody who's not familiar with Malta, we're a tiny island just south of Sicily, which is just south of Italy. Population is 430,000, so we're pretty much like a small city. But we are an island republic, member of the EU, and you know, economically and you know, as a country, we're doing pretty well. As an exchange, I think we need to go back to basics. You asked, what does an exchange signify? What does it bring to the table?
Yeah.
I think if you look at the basics, an exchange really does bring players to the table in an area, in an environment which has transparency, which has certainty, which has you know, regulatory frameworks, which allow people to get on board, knowing what they're going to be doing, knowing why they're going to be doing it, essentially, to some extent, I hope, and really just knowing their position in terms of a legal framework. And therefore, because you're talking about an exchange which globally, the term is not going to really change very fundamentally. You're going to talk about an exchange which is going to be operating in the US and the EU, you know, Far East. They all build on the same principles: transparency, regulatory frameworks, you know, everybody getting in with their eyes pretty much as open as they could be, or they should be. And therefore, that would create the harmonization which is going to happen in a global environment. Because once you're talking about money, when you're talking about movement of capital, in a traditional sense, you still need that level of harmonization between exchanges, between different jurisdictions, so that they speak together and they dovetail. That's in principle.
Right.
When you apply it to the crypto, into the token structures, etc., what we're trying to do, together with Neufund as well as others, is come up with structures which are going to build on the new regulatory structures which have been put into place in Malta. For those who don't know, Malta is the first country to actually legislate and to have regulatory structures which are going to cater for exchanges, digital assets, virtual financial assets, I mean, and also the structure under which these can be brought to market. And so, still in its infancy, this was only enacted last July, so you know, really it's very, very fresh. What we have is the technology which has been really rushing and doing 100 miles an hour, in all sorts of directions, because everybody's looking for their little space and their little niche and how to create something which is going to work. And they've done that, because obviously some systems are clearly working. But you have the regulatory structures which are trying to catch up. And at the moment, and I think in terms of the business side, and I think we need to look at the business side, the techies are really working on the structures in terms of how they work technologically. But then we need to ensure that the business part of things is also going to cater for the needs of the investors as well as the issuers.
Right. Okay. So that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Right
I know.
there.
Sorry. Okay. I think I'll go now.
No. Good night. So you talked about regulatory certainty, but you also talked about the importance of interoperability.
Yeah.
And then you also said you guys are the first ones that have regulatory certainty. So how is that going to work? If we don't have anybody else that has regulatory certainty, do we have no interoperability yet? And when is that going to happen? Can it happen?
Well, I think there's a difference between technological interoperability and
regulatory
and
harmony.
Regulatory certainty.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think what you're alluding to is that we're sitting here in the U.S. and there's clearly a great deal of pent-up demand and interest in this space, but there's not regulatory certainty in this country. There's not any legal sort of definition of what a DAO is or virtual financial assets in this country. And I think part of the reason why Malta has had such success as a jurisdiction is because they have brought that certainty to the table in a way that companies have been craving for. And
Absolutely.
so you've seen some of the largest companies in the space, Binance, Neufund, as well as OKX and other great companies in this space that have latched on to this because it's such an absolute necessity. So I think from an interoperability standpoint, you can still certainly have that. It's more a question of which jurisdictions are going to evolve, which jurisdictions are going to recognize that their regulatory measures need to catch up with the technological progress that we're seeing globally.
Yeah, and what's the answer to that? Which jurisdictions are going to do that? Anybody know?
I mean,
I'd like to say that Malta will be around in a few years' time and still
Yeah.
be one of the leading jurisdictions. I believe that we have the vision, and I believe that we have the means and the networking, as well as our own operating structures, to be able to get this and carry on with it and run with it. As an island, we were one of the first, as a jurisdiction, not an island, to actually grab this with both hands and legislate and everything. We've got the support of the local government, who are really the drivers in this particular area, because they did see that this is an opportunity for Malta to put itself on the map in this particular area.
Are there differing strategies among exchanges internationally that are worth mentioning?
yeah, I think there's some interesting progress going on. The London Stock Exchange is partnering with a few UK startups to issue tokenized equity in a regulated manner. The Australian Securities Exchange has been working on DLT more broadly and integrating that into their clearing and settlement system since 2015. Although their technologists, I guess, move quite slowly because they're targeting a rollout in 2021 or 2022. But I think also what's interesting, going back to this topic of different jurisdictions, is the Monetary Authority of Singapore recently came out and said that every utility token they have seen is not a security in their mind, and they publicly stated that they expect to veer quite significantly different from the SEC. And so I think a lot of jurisdictions outside of the United States view security tokens as an opportunity to catch up with the United States in terms of the broader capital markets infrastructure. And while you've seen some willingness, and David, I think, alluded to this in his address earlier this morning, some willingness from the SEC chairman, a recognition that these laws are outdated and they need to change. I think things move a little bit slowly, more slowly here, because there's already this established environment for capital markets, whereas the other jurisdictions see that as an opportunity to catch up, and I think are capitalizing on that, Malta being the preeminent example.
Yeah. No doubt.
I would take it a little bit, perhaps a bit further, and it was mentioned, alluded to at least earlier on. Today we have two camps, if you like. You have the traditional capital markets, traditional financial services sector, traditional way of doing things, and we have the new way. And at the moment, they're not actually talking to each other really well. They're certainly speaking different languages. I would say that, fast forward a number of years. Now, how many of those years it's going to be, I don't know. But I think it's going to be a matter of when, not if. We're going to have a structure where the financial services sector is going to be using DLT, is going to be embracing the new tokens in terms of a form as a digital asset, is going to be looking at new operating technological structures, but we do need to have that certainty, the legal certainty, which is going to have the regulatory structure which is going to support these to work. If we don't have a regulatory structure which is going to support the way these new services are going to be operating, then you're going to have confusion.
Is one of the fundamental issues this whole utility versus security token definition? Is that as fundamental as you see in the news, at least? In other words, there's a lot of sort of intuitive definitions that say that can't be a security, and yet people are declaring that everything must be. Yeah. And is that one of the tensions?
I think that's a fundamental difference between the US and the EU. The US is clearly saying if it's a token, it's a security. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. No argument. Our point of view is one looks at the utility. And if it is a simple utility type of token, then it's one definition. If it is a store of value, which is going to be traded, etc., then it's going to be a different thing altogether.
And is Malta doing what Singapore's doing by sort of recognizing the utility tokens as their own thing? And
Absolutely. So we will look at a security token, we'll look at the underlying, and we would say, okay, is this an investment? Is this a security which is going to be traded, etc., or is it something which is just a mechanism, which is not necessarily a security?
Is there somewhere someone can look up what you guys define as a utility versus a security?
Well, our legislation is public, so this is actual law. Yeah. This has been enacted into law last July, following consultations by the regulator, etc.
Sure.
And the regulator has also worked very closely with private entities such as lawyers and accountants, etc. Right. To make sure that the regulations, once they were enacted into law, are something which is going to actually make sense and be practical. Because very often you get legislation coming in, and then when you actually put it into practice, you find that there's a bit of a differential gap. In this area, I think there's been a certain amount of, quite a significant amount of consultation and input from different parties, and yes, the law is there, it's public. There are three legislative structures. I'm not going to go into the details over here, but certainly a virtual financial asset is defined into what it is, what it's supposed to do.
Terrific. I want to shift and hear a little bit about what the heck is Neufund?
Yeah.
Like you guys have a lot of things going on. You're a hybrid. You're very interesting and unusual.
Yeah, so it's a good segue too, because we're talking about sort of the differences between utility and security tokens. Yeah. Regardless of sort of the legal definitions or the way that different jurisdictions come down on this, I think there's still very clearly a ton of demand from investors' standpoint that utility tokens are great for their purpose, but investors want to own securities. They want to have shareholder protections that they're used to. Neufund, our core business, is a primary offerings marketplace for tokenized securities. So we structure equity tokens in the initial phase. We work with equity tokens. We're certainly open to tokenized funds and real estate and other asset classes in the future. We structure legally binding and regulatory compliant equity tokens and issue them under German jurisdiction. And our platform is both. We are a protocol as well as a platform. We bridge both the on-chain and the off-chain worlds. Our community is comprised of both those from the crypto community as well as those from the traditional finance community. And part of the reason for that is because both these parties, although they may seem at odds in some way, they all have the same craving. And they, again, going back to this idea, they want these shareholder protections. So our platform enables issuers on the one hand to come and raise capital for their companies, and investors to invest in those offerings, and to know that when they invest in those offerings, that they can go to a court in Germany should a company should there be some type of dispute resolution that's necessary at a certain stage. They can go to a court in Germany and they can exercise their shareholder protections, and that's something that doesn't really exist today when we think about the crypto landscape. And I think that's why it's really important what we're doing, and our work with Malta is meant to say, let's take these security tokens that we're issuing and let's give them room to run. Let's give them an ecosystem to be able to flourish in. So issuance platforms are great, they're important, but again, it's the liquidity, it's the exchanges, it's the marrying of those two worlds that needs to come together for this whole ecosystem to flourish.
Yeah, amen, brother. So you do something also very fascinating that maybe you could explain, which is you generate a platform token for investors. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so we're a decentralized and community-owned platform. And when I say that, I mean investors who invest through Neufund, they are also economic co-owners of our platform. So Neumark, which is a play on the old Deutsche Mark, is our protocol token. And every time you invest in an ETO, in addition to receiving equity tokens in a company that you're investing in, you're also receiving Neumark, our protocol token, as a reward additionally on the side. Neumark is an incentivization scheme. So when the early adopters of our platform are rewarded with more Neumark than those who sort of join the party later. And as we get to $1.5 billion of capital that's raised on our platform, then that will be the totality of the Neumarks that are issued once we get to $1.5 billion. In the earlier stages, that reward is higher, like I said, and the point of doing that is to say is to create sort of a natural sort of incentive scheme for people to want to invest using our platform, because not only are they receiving equity, but they're also receiving a liquid and tradable utility token in our protocol token. And I think that's very different than some of the other issuance platforms, particularly those that are here in the United States. And I think it's one of our core differentiators. And so when you actually hold our Neumark, you receive a portion of the fees of every company that conducts an ETO, an equity token offering on our platform. So there's a 3% fee charged to issuers in the form of capital raised, and that's in either Ether or Euro. Investors can invest in either Ether or Euro on our platform, and a 2% fee of the equity tokens that are generated. That's charged to an issuer. When those fees are charged, they are then distributed 100% to all NOI token holders. Wow. So Fifth Force, the company that I work for that pays my paycheck, is a NOI token holder, but everybody else who uses our platform is also a NOI token holder.
Okay, so Fifth Force.
Fifth Force GmbH.
Okay, there's a new name. Does Fifth Force do anything other than Neufund?
No, we are the legal entity behind
Got it.
Neufund.
Okay,
Yeah.
just checking. Okay, so is it, you said the early token holders of the Neumark get more, the later investors get fewer. Are we early or late now? If I started, am I late or am I early?
We're early.
I'm early.
Yeah.
This is the first time. This is exciting. Okay,
yeah,
great.
And we'll be having some very, very exciting news to share shortly with respect to.
I'm just going to call my wife really quick and let her know. Okay,
ETOs will begin in Q4 of this year on our platform. So.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So what's the nature of your partnership or collaboration with Malta?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been speaking about it.
Essentially, we as an exchange, we're a domestic exchange. So
Yes.
we have Maltese issuers, predominantly the government of Malta, but I have 50 organizations which are admitted onto the regulated main market. We have our own SME market, the growth market. Looking at this space, we and obviously our shareholders see that this is going to be an interesting area to be in. Now we can either just ignore it and see what happens, wait for the dust to settle, and then maybe join, as some other jurisdictions are doing perhaps. But we took the strategic view to say, okay, we would like to be involved in this. What do we bring to the table? We don't bring the technological side. Obviously, we have colleagues who are able to do that much better than us. We do bring the structure, we bring the reputation, we bring the jurisdiction behind us. Obviously, as an exchange, we have our DLT and other anti-money laundering processes and all the support structures you would need to be able to operate an exchange, even if it's a digital exchange, especially in the new world where we have full transparency, etc. And hopefully, we will end up in a situation, fast forward some time, where we'll be working with chosen partners to actually make the systems actually work in real life situations, and where we have legal certainty, where we have investor confidence, and that's very important, because at the end of the day, you need to have investor confidence to be able to get onto these platforms and actually take that bold first step and get into this area. You know,
Right.
and I think that having, you know, legal certainty and having the structures and a face, not in terms of a human face, but a face as in a corporate face, which has, you know, obviously its own reputation, its own history. You know, it's something that people will, I hope, want to rely on in order to get them to make that first move.
In your the work to set this up, were you in conversation with other jurisdictions and to figure out if you wanted to do it together or anything like that?
We have been approached by jurisdictions to see, you know, do we want to work together or not, etc. We felt and still feel that we have the regulator on our side in this area. The regulator is certainly groundbreaking, is the pioneer in this area, and we're following the regulator's step to follow and really see where that takes us.
Any idea of who's following behind you? Anything for us to all see who's coming
There are
next?
some jurisdictions which are looking, you know, to do this. You know, Eastern European, there's Estonia for one. There's Luxembourg, which is looking at it.
Yeah.
You know, London as well, of course.
Gibraltar Stock
Gibraltar's
Exchange as
looking at
well
it as well.
is working on is working on a similar initiative as well. Yeah, I mean, I think that just goes to show that there's a great deal of interest in this space and a great deal of jurisdictions that want to be part of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely.
So what do you predict for the security token, call it industry, it's not really industry, what do we call it, the ecosystem? How is it going to look? I mean, people thought that this might be the year of the security token, but now we're kind of toward the end. Is 2019 going to just be the explosion, the hockey stick of security token implementation uptake?
I'll go ahead. Yeah, so I think we're certainly going to see even more growth in 2019 than we've seen in 2018. I think it's really important, though, like to avoid these sort of grandiose claims that everything under the sun is going to take place in 1 year's time.
Right.
And just recognize that this is a major, major evolution, and it will take years for it to play out. It will take years for regulators to wake up in some jurisdictions. It will take you know, time for the technology to evolve. I think what's really exciting is that we're starting to see, you know, previously the discussion around security tokens, and particularly in the media, was like, what are they, and what's the opportunity?
Yeah.
And now you're starting to see the conversation evolve. You're hearing talk about standards, although most of them are entirely too U.S. focused and focused on the idea of accreditation, which doesn't actually apply to security tokens that are issued through our platform.
Right.
Everyone can invest in security tokens on our platform, not just accredited investors. And so I think you're going to see clearly more and more people get into the space. You're going to see more of the infrastructure built out. But in terms of these lofty market projections, I try to just look at the technology and look at the real core progress that's taking place.
I like the quote.
I very much share that view. We've put the building blocks into place, but it's not enough. Obviously, we need to take that quantum leap and start really looking towards getting the quality business, and I think that's really important. We would be very interested in running with quality partners, as we've done with Neufund and with others. And looking at solid business proposals which have all the right, they tick all the boxes, which certainly at an infancy stage, which we're in at the moment, the last thing we want to do is attract players who are going to really drop the level of
course,
confidence and reliability, transparency, etc. So I'd rather we take a little bit longer and really come up with the right level of interaction and quality in respect of the market that's going to come about, than try and rush into this and then get it wrong.
Absolutely. There's the quote that I like is, I think it's been attributed to Bill Gates, but I have to say that because on the internet you never know. But it's that we always overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 year and underestimate what can be accomplished in 10 years. And I think that probably applies here. Well, thank you both for sharing your expertise with us, and enjoy the rest of the day. Give it up for Alex and Cliff.